Hello and welcome to the Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. I'm your host, Dr. David Hardy. And today on our show, we've got another amazing guest. She is a pioneer and thought leader in brain health, the founder of Flow to Thrive, and the host of the Sustainable Human podcast. Welcome to the show, Linda Jarnhamn. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is exciting. I'm really interested in what you're doing and the approaches you're taking in business and in brain health here. For the people listening in, and have you heard these stats? Because I go to them all the time, but each time I read these, they shock me. Like right now, the World Economic Forum has put brain disorders at an estimated $5 trillion per year. And like, there's only 2 countries that have a GDP over $5 trillion. And then on top of that, just by scaling existing interventions, society could unlock 130 million years of high quality life. Like, why isn't this a business imperative? Like, I know you're working on it, but what have you heard about this that you're like, this needs to be a conversation in every single business out there?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It absolutely has to be. I think one of the challenges with those big numbers is that they are so big that they're actually difficult to comprehend. And I think that's one reason. I think
how many businesses are actually aware of this?
That it's hard to say, right? But I think very important, something that makes me very happy is I've talked about brain health since in business since about 2017, 2018. That's when we started to build the methodology that I've developed. And at the time, very, very few talked about brain health and very, few understood the concept around brain health. Now and today, and I think particularly the last sort of 6 months, I've seen a massive shift in that. We hear a lot from clients. We hear a lot from potential clients. There is a lot more being talked about out both nationally and internationally about the importance of brain health. And that's not just from the aspect of illness and disease, but really more from a preventative, creating healthy habits and lifestyles, but also from employers' perspective, starting to really understand and see the link between a healthy brain and a high-performing brain, and therefore also collectively a high-performing organization.
Nice. I love it. Like this is under the umbrella of brain health, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of talk on mental health, and then also in the business world on just lack of productivity. And there's talk, and there's debates and people kind of fighting back and forth and all sorts of stuff. But we're starting to look at solutions now, aren't we? And that's why I love coming across Flow to Thrive here, is that it's a part of a solution to this big issue here. That the talk is happening to some extent, maybe not in the terms that we're throwing out there with brain health yet. But we do need to start to identify things that are actionable, that people can take steps to and make changes. And for instance, your brain health model covers 55 factors. What's included in 55 factors here?
Well, I think it's 44 plus 13 outcome factors. Yes, yeah.
Well, walk us through this.
So I'll come to that in a second. But, to address the question around action, yes, I think there is more and more action being taken around brain health. But I think we're at the same page as we were and maybe still are with mental health, that we are not always going to the core of the problems and really very few organizations really go to an extent of identifying the issues and the underlying drivers of the issues to then create the solutions. We very often just jump straight to potential solutions that are the latest trends that are available in the market, or maybe just friends that we know, frankly, who provide solutions. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to address with the Flow to Thrive methodology. It's to go to the core of what makes a human brain work and be and perform well. And
I love how you put that, because in my profession with functional neurology, I get so sick of people just talking about tools, or I've got this, what should I do about it? And nobody does the time, the work to do a full assessment.
Yeah.
And it kind of drives me crazy. It's like the tool doesn't matter until you know what's going on.
No, and I totally agree. And I think a separate topic, we can get to that later, is that the vast majority of organizations are still spending time on extrinsic factors around performance management, reward, incentives, etc., which actually have very little direct correlation with the actual performance of a human being on a day-to-day basis. But if we shift that focus to focus on more of the intrinsic drivers and factors that physiologically can help an individual to perform or be, to potentially perform at their best, because they also need to have the right skills. They need to have the right experience.
Yes.
You can quite easily, as I've said to quite a few clients who are big, large professional services firms and financial institutions, you can hire, and you do hire, incredibly talented individuals with very good skills, and some of them with significant experience, but they are physiologically, drained. They are not at a point where they can optimize their potential and use all of those skills, because they're not there. Simply, they're too stressed. They're burnt out. I don't like to talk too much about the word burnout, but you are physiologically not there, and therefore your brain cannot function optimally. And that is what organizations need to learn and understand how to do that. And that's what we're trying to do. Well, that's what the whole Flow to Thrive model is designed to help.
So how many businesses have kind of pushed back on that and said, well, we're a business, we're not a healthcare company. So how do we promote health in our businesses? And well, shouldn't that be kind of the government health plans or whoever we farm that out to with the insurance? Has that ever come up?
You absolutely have that. You absolutely have organizations who are, or leaders, I should say. An organization in itself isn't afraid, but a leader who could be afraid of dealing with health and well-being related issues and aspects. Absolutely. But in the end, as a leader, you are the one who are responsible for making sure that your organization is there to deliver the value it's set out to deliver, right? And to do that, you need to have the right resources in the right mindset with the right skills to do that. So I think as a leader, you have the responsibility to do that. But I think that again is where it comes back to the wrong. We typically focus, or many organizations still focus on the wrong things. So they focus on what I call in the model that you just talked about, they focus on what I call way of living. So lifestyle factors, which to a large extent is the responsibility of the individual. You as a leader and as an organization need to understand how you, through your culture and the second bucket that we have, ways of working, might be influencing how people are actually able to live a healthy lifestyle. Because very often do we not sleep well enough, we don't move enough, we don't recharge enough, and we don't socialize enough because we're working too much.
Right.
But what's interesting with that is when we run specific analysis through the index and ask the question, what do high-performing individuals do differently to those who are less well-performing? And what are those who say that they feel well mentally doing different to those who feel less well mentally? There are a number of things that they do. And the first one is, and this has got nothing to do with healthcare, they plan their time differently. Very, very simple. They plan their time very, very meticulously, and they carve out space to not be interrupted. They recharge more. So they actually spend less time at work. But when they're at work, they're more effective, which means that they actually say that they have a much better social life. So it's, as I tend to say, it's never either or. It's a combination of factors that ultimately will have the outcome and the impact. But you must go to the core and the bottom of what actually are the underlying factors that can trigger a change and a chain of events that will change both individually and collectively. And you know this, but a lot of people don't think about it, is the fact that the brain is sort of structured in the same way, right? But we're genetically, epigenetically, neurologically, and physiologically different. So
Absolutely.
It's like it's the same dough, but it's been baked differently over time. And that means that the same type of ingredients will go into the dough to make it taste good, for the brain to work well at the end. But
yeah, there is kind of like those macros that you put in. There's the big things that are needed, and then there's the what I call the seasoning on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we all need to sleep, we all need to move, etc., etc., etc. But the levels are different, and what's important for someone who's 55, a female of 55 and a male who's 25 will be different.
Absolutely. Now you touched on something very important, and that was the time management. And then there's so many people out there that say, well, I just struggle with it.
Yeah.
But businesses and organizations in general have the impact on environment. And the impact on environment could help people time manage better. Like they're used to being around people that actually have systems in place as well. And they like that team environment. And I go back to like the sports analogy. There's some people who thrive with individual sports and they can manage their training and their nutrition, all of that on their own. And then there are some who just thrive in the team environment and building off each other. Is that kind of a theme with some of the corporate work you've done then as well?
Not specifically the individual and the team aspect overall, but I think you're hitting on something really, really important around the overall environment, because 90% of productivity waste come from interruptions. The number one stressor that tends to come up are interruptions, and that's one of the, in the index, the score that tend to be amongst the lowest of them all. And we ask about both interruptions from others and interruptions from yourself. Mobile phones. It's huge. So not everyone likes when I say this, but very rarely, apart from some organizations which have business models where people are working long hours, that's necessary for the business to survive. But a large proportion of individuals don't have an excessive amount of work to do. They're just not using their time effectively to deliver what they could be doing in, a normal day's work. So I fundamentally believe it's not an issue about time. It's an issue around how we manage the energy of our brains.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if the energy is high, then you're going to be more focused and able to stay on track for those chunks or periods where you need to perform. And so I love that combination approach that's happening with things. And we talk corporate here. And of course, everybody's minds always go to the office type situation. And then maybe some people were thinking the at-home office with interruptions like galore. But on top of that, and this is what really fascinated me as well with what you're doing, is You're doing work with blue-collar workers, people in the mines, and kind of the productivity and the brain health surrounding this. Like,
Yeah.
just give us a picture of this demographic. Are they stoic? Are they the ones that aren't going to talk about their brain health? They're just going to try to push through things. What is this world like?
So, I mean, it's an interesting. So we've been commissioned by the Swedish Metals and Minerals Innovation Program and the Swedish Innovation Agency to conduct a feasibility study, which we're actually closing next week.
Okay.
With a pure focus on assessing the feasibility of developing a methodology and a platform to assess, measure, track, and report on the brain health within the industry, and with a core focus, because a large proportion of the work used to be physical, and now with automation, robotization, which is huge, and Sweden is leading in that space in the mining industry, people are shifting from below ground to above ground. And with that, you've got physical risks transforming into cognitive risks and cognitive risks. And one of the conclusions we've made during the project is awareness is there to some degree amongst leaders, but very, very few actually specifically and strategically apply and assess and focus on brain health specifically. But that's what we're aiming to change with the project, to do that in a structured way, because the cognitive load will shift fundamentally. Cognitive stress and demands will differ phenomenally, and with that, with the change, with massive automation and robotization of the industry, it has significant impact on.
What are some of those impacts then? What's the outcomes here?
Well, so some of it is, it's interesting because you immediately go to think that it will be about, an enhanced cognitive load, that there will be more strain on the brain during a typical working day. But actually, one of the biggest risks, or one of the large risks, is around fatigue and apathy, because rather than being active down in a mine, you're sitting in a control room, for example, just watching a screen.
That kind of sounds boring.
And it can become really, really boring. And I think to a large extent, and this is what we're aiming to assess once we start building the platform, fatigue and apathy could almost be more dangerous than, if you're overly stressed.
Right. And this all goes back to movement as well, though. Like stress is that chemical flowing through our body that's there to make us move and do something. And if we don't use it, it sits there and festers.
Yeah. Which is another thing, right? That you have a large population who are used to moving about during the day, who had no problem, which, typical office workers have a big issue with. It's not moving enough, being sedentary throughout their days, where here we're now shifting that, quite excessive amount of movement during a day into being suddenly sedentary, which again, will have an impact on the brain. And what's interesting is the company, we've partnered with another company, and they design control rooms, and they've actually just designed and implemented a control room where they have walking stations, and they have air, light, and sound controlled desks. So you can actually control the temperature, you control the sound. They have sound showers, and very controlled environments to create healthier environments.
Wow. There's a lot of innovation happening here. What are some of the other really kind of innovative solutions you've heard around the environment and brain health then?
I think for me, it's actually not so much about the innovative solutions. For me, it's more about really going back to the basics. And
yes.
one of the things we haven't talked about is what I call place of work. So we look at physical place of work, and we sort of touched on it a bit, and the digital place of work. And that's where I think we can start looking at some innovative solutions. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the physical place, I think it's fundamentally also understanding what is truly impacting a person during a working day. And we talked about it a little bit in regards to the mining project, but air quality and the impact both on short-term and long-term health risk
is massive.
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Massively misunderstood, or just awareness just isn't there at all around that. And the impact on performance. Level of CO2 in a room can have significant effect on someone's cognition. So I tend to say, if you want to negotiate with someone and you really want to give them a tough time, you should make sure you sit in a room with good quality air and give them a room with really poor quality.
No, make it stuffy, everything, yeah. And that kind of goes into like the old Las Vegas pumping oxygen into the gambling rooms.
Yeah. Yeah,
like, how much more alert were people with oxygen? Oh, wow. Yeah. It was noticeable.
Yeah, and I had a really interesting person on my podcast almost a year ago now, who's done some really interesting research around chess players, world-leading chess players and air quality, where they in controlled environments,
right? Yeah.
So not real competitions, with some really interesting insights. Where I do think companies could start to innovate, and where there is awareness, but I think I call it a combination of fascination and fear at the moment. It's when it comes to measuring through biofeedback and neurofeedback, to start understanding in people's physiology and physiological resilience, but also to start to, there's some really nifty tools now to start measuring through EEG, brainwave, and cognition. And that's where I think cognitive load, cognitive stress, and attention are incredibly interesting, just from a learning perspective. If you want to help people understand how they can think better and not, optimize the use of their brain energy, because what we tend to do is to be constantly on throughout the day, right?
But and that makes zero sense. Yeah.
It does. And you tend to have what I call a diminishing return on the time you're spending, which is why I keep on saying it's not the volume of work, it's how we're using the energy of our brains that is actually the issue. But that's where I think we could really start to innovate, because that helps us understand how we think and how we're using our cognition during a day. Because there are very few tools that are, I think, useful to an average office worker today. I'm sorry to say. Because there are fundamental underlying issues that they need to address first. We need to address...
Yeah, and that goes back to that $5 trillion figure out there, is that most people are walking around with a brain and a system that's not optimal.
No. So we need to address how we work. We need to address the interruptions. We need to address the multitasking. We need to understand the importance of the things that everyone thinks are soft, that are actually the fundamental underlying drivers. Psychological safety, trust, meaning, belonging. If we don't have that, we're not going to be able to perform. And this is really interesting when you start measuring through bio-neurofeedback, because you can see the direct link. We ran a project with one of the world's largest professional services firms a few years back, where they got wearables, I won't say which one, to measure stress, sleep, activity, and other things. And it was really interesting to see how their stress levels changed, because we could measure it on a second-by-second basis and see very, very clearly when they felt safe and comfortable in a situation. how the stress levels went down, and how when I had a couple of people who traveled a lot, and they were sitting this was in the Middle East, so they were sitting in Saudi Arabia, sometimes working for weeks, not coming back, and how they could see their stress levels just going down as they were talking to family members.
Yes. Yep.
Or as they were having a very meaningful conversation with a colleague. And so therefore, I think if there's something that, from an innovation perspective, is to actually go to the core and dare to look at real data on how we are impacted neurologically and physiologically by certain and different actions, because only then we will start to actually change and turn the dial on the things that truly can have an impact on brain health. After that, you can go away and do all the infrared saunas and what have you, that are out there that, biohackers and others tend to like. But I think one of the most telling stories I've ever, pictures in my mind was actually quite a few years back now at a biohacking summit here in Sweden.
Okay, yep.
And there were presenters talking about all sorts of different cool tools and technologies and things to do. And we had this incredible professor standing up, starting to talk about sleep and stress. And suddenly the cameras came up. And, in a presentation, there's something in it when the cameras come up and it's starting to come up. And for me, that was such a telling story that you had all of these individuals sitting in that room, knowing more than the typical average person around how to optimize their health, but they still had one fundamental issue to tackle, and that was stress. Right? And until you address that and understand, the importance of stress and autonomic balance and how that helps you regulate your brain and what you do, everything else is just plasters on wounds that will never heal.
Right. And
sorry.
No, I completely agree with that, because energy is the biggest thing. And we've talked about breathing. Well, breathing is more important than hydration. Yeah. Hydration is more important than nutrition. All three are very, very important.
Yeah.
Stress on top of that, though, bleeds and sucks out energy. And then how do we function in an environment where we need energy? And there's all sorts of things, though, too, out there to kind of help rehabilitate people whose systems are just down in the dumps. Absolutely. But if we continue to pour gasoline on the fire, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole work environment right now. Is it's outdated. The stress that's provided is fake stress. It's not the tiger running at you trying to hunt you. It is fake stress. And we have the ability to change the way we live, work, and feel. And that's why I'm so happy to find ways and systems we can do that and actually put it in play, instead of just talking about how shitty people feel out there. We're just rehashing the same arguments. And then, of course, it's people who have that suck it up mentality versus, no, we need to talk more about this. Well, no, we need solutions. We need to make changes. And there is data out there on how to do it. Let's actually start doing some of it. So once again, I really love the work you're doing in this arena to make that happen in these situations. And on top of that, though, how do people find out more information on what you're doing, what you're promoting, and the people you're talking with?
Well, it's through the Flow to Thrive website, I would say, is a very good way, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. And the Sustainable Human podcast, I think, for me, is one way to reach out to the world on this topic, where the focus is more around Well, we've ended up talking a lot about brain health, actually.
Right. Yes.
But for me, the driver there was around reporting and external reporting. Um, drive the dialogue there around the need for better data also externally to the financial markets, to around ESG reporting and sustainability reporting, where we still, again, are just looking at data points, apart from a few companies now.
So it's going to be very niche in that sense that, yeah, you're in the system and here's the metrics and here's how to go about reading and figuring it out.
Yeah, and I think the most companies really, they focus on then their report, and regulations are focused on reporting on things that are not necessarily related to brain health or have a direct correlation with employee performance. But it makes them look good.
I love it. So definitely check out Flow to Thrive.
Yep.
Reach out to Linda. And of course, stay tuned to the next episode of The Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. Take care.